Nancy Gonzalez was trusted to supervise some of the most dangerous inmates in federal custody. Instead, she crossed the line between guard and prisoner. What began as inappropriate conversations became an unlawful relationship, leading to a pregnancy, a prison sentence, and a scandal that followed her far beyond the prison walls. And why did she risk it all? A man. A prisoner she was supposed to guard, not lust after. A man convicted in the deaths of 2 undercover detectives. Welcome to Because of Him, where every true crime story has one thing in common. A woman whose obsession, jealousy, or desire for a man drove her to commit a shocking crime. Before we dive into our villain of the day, Nancy, let's first talk about the type of man she risked it all for. Ronell Wilson. Ronell was born in May of 1982 and grew up around the Stapleton houses on Staten Island, New York. By his teenage years, he already had several criminal convictions under his belt, including robbery and an assault so brutal the victim needed 300 stitches. He climbed the ranks of a violent street gang called the Stapleton Crew, which was linked to the Bloods, robberies, and illegal firearms across the borough. In March 2003, 2 undercover NYPD detectives, James Namarin and Rodney Andrews, were working a firearms sting operation, posing as buyers looking to purchase a weapon from the Stapleton Crew. Ronell, 20 years old at the time, was in the car with them. Somewhere along the way, he clocked that they were cops. Instead of walking away, he directed them to a second location and shot both detectives in the back of the head, before dumping their bodies and driving off in their own car. Ronell was eventually arrested and sentenced to death for killing the detectives. An appeals court later threw that death sentence out over legal errors made during the trial, which meant Ronell was sent back for a new penalty phase to determine once again whether he would face the death penalty or not. That retrial was still hanging over his head when Nancy entered his life 9 years later. In early 2012, Ronell was moved into a special unit at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, New York, which held roughly 1,000 to 2,000 inmates at the time. The K-81 unit was designed for inmates who were mentally disturbed or especially vulnerable, and the goal was to keep him away from other gang-affiliated inmates. After all, Ronell was not an ordinary inmate. He was high-profile, dangerous, and waiting to learn whether he would be sent back to death row. His move into the K-81 unit placed him in close, regular contact with Nancy, who was one of the officers assigned to guard that unit on the 4 p.m. to midnight shift. On paper, 29-year-old Nancy Gonzalez appeared qualified to oversee a high-profile prisoner. She had a federal position, military experience, and by then had spent 4 years working as a correctional officer with some of the most treacherous inmates. But behind the uniform and her credentials, she was known behind bars for sleeping with her colleagues, supervisors, and an inmate who had been transferred to another prison. By March 2012, Nancy had begun a 5-month relationship with Ronell. According to court documents, she was seen spending time with him in a vacant activity room near his cell. On her days off, she would call the facility to check on him. With his new correctional officer girlfriend, Ronell gained power inside the unit and created an unsafe environment for other inmates. To some extent, he was untouchable. On one occasion, he viciously beat up another inmate while Nancy turned a blind eye. The jail walls may have been thick, but scandals like this do not stay buried forever. Other inmates reportedly noticed what was happening and tried to blow the whistle on their relationship. One inmate reportedly spotted her stepping away from Ronell's, while Ronell stood in the doorway with his trousers down. Then, an anonymous letter exposing the relationship was placed in a locked complaint box. By the very next day, an enraged Ronell had somehow gotten his hands on that letter and threatened payback to whoever wrote it. If Ronell could influence staff, intimidate other inmates, and treat the unit like his own personal kingdom, then something was broken long before their escapade. Nancy later admitted she had intercepted the letter herself, with help from another guard, who was also one of her many sexual partners behind bars. This is where the whole thing starts to look less like one bad decision and more like a corrupt correctional facility. By June 2012, Nancy had become pregnant with Ronell's baby, after having intercourse on 3 separate weekends in the vacant room near his cell. According to prosecutors, Nancy's pregnancy was intentional. 5 years earlier, during his own trial, Ronell had written to another inmate that he wanted, in his own words, a baby before the pigs try to take his life. He wanted a child he could present to the jury as a reason to spare him. In that same letter, he also said he wanted to leave something behind before he died. We can all agree that not everyone's bloodline deserves to continue like a movie sequel, and Ronell was certainly one of them. In recorded phone calls, monitored routinely because that is standard practice in federal facilities, Nancy confessed to her boyfriend, who was, believe it or not, serving time himself in a New York State prison, that she was pregnant with another man's baby. Cheating and having a baby with a death row inmate while your boyfriend is locked up in another prison says a lot about her taste in men. In another call, this time to the mother of her boyfriend, Nancy said she had taken a chance because she was vulnerable and wanted to be loved. She also admitted she felt like she had gotten sucked into Ronell's world and said something along the lines of, "Why not give him a child?" as a way of giving him some kind of hope. On February 5th, 2013, almost a year after the relationship started, there was enough evidence for prosecutors to go ahead and arrest Nancy. A psychiatric evaluation upon her arrest found that she had an untreated personality disorder, rooted in deep emotional shame and guilt from severe abuse she suffered as a child. Her lawyer also claimed that her supervisors knew about her unresolved sexual trauma, yet 2 of them allegedly exploited her vulnerability and became sexually involved with her. In July that year, she pleaded guilty to illegal sexual contact with an inmate. By that point, Nancy also had given birth to their son, whom she later lost custody of after a family court raised concerns involving substance abuse and neglect. The child was reportedly placed with relatives. On February 19th, 2014, Nancy Gonzalez, then 30 years old, was sentenced in federal court in Brooklyn to 1 year in prison. Nancy Gonzalez learned the hard way that when you throw caution to the wind, the storm usually comes back around. At the end of the day, she had every opportunity to walk away. She was not coerced at gunpoint. She was not being blackmailed. She was supposed to know better. Instead, she chose to derail her life over a man behind bars, whom she had authority over. Subscribe and stay tuned for the next shocking story. There is always a male-centered woman whose obsession, jealousy, or desire for a man ended in tragedy.